The Wastewater Resources Advisory Committee holds its first meeting this week. We have details on this episode of Barnstable Today. It's Friday, February 5th, 2016. I'm Sarah Mantle. The Wastewater Resources Advisory Committee will work to help craft a plan to reduce nitrogen loading in Barnstable waterways. It was formed as a result of the Cape Cod Commission's 208 Water Quality Plan. The group held its first meeting this week. Cape Cod Commission Executive Director Paul Niedzwiecki talked to the committee about how the plan could be implemented in Barnstable.
So what we're giving you here is an example from 3 bays. And basically the problem solving is happening on a sub-embayment level. So we've taken 3 bays and we break it down into its constituent components. And we have in the plan allocated nitrogen responsibility town by town and shared watersheds. It is done as a percentage, and it's also done in kilograms. And that will be important as we sort of go through the process to be able to keep both of those in mind. So this is in the plan. And this is an example of what the watershed report template would look like, right? So it talks about the problems, contributing towns, MEP restoration scenario, describes the estuary, the watershed, and freshwater sources, as well as streams, drinking water sources. Looks at the degree of impairment, and then the ecological characteristics of water quality. So it's not too burdensome as reports go. This template's like 4 pages long. So this is the 3rd page, which talks about the nitrogen management, traditional, non-traditional approaches, a hybrid if you have one, if you're ready to go to that next step. And it talks about the local progress by the towns that are included. So this watershed report looks at those sort of potential watershed scenarios. So you have, for example, a centralized scenario that's centralized but has disposal back in the watershed. Scenario that has a centralized approach that has a discharge outside of the watershed. We look at a completely non-traditional approach, and then the community gets together in the town and they try to figure out what the most efficient approach is, and that would be represented by the hybrid scenario. And that's the report. So this is a process slide that talks, at least from the Commission's perspective, as how we see communities starting to move through planning on a watershed basis. And that's to establish a watershed load, look at any sub-embayment nitrogen limits associated with the watershed, and using the watershed technical report. So we figure out what the nitrogen situation is. Then we go and we look at credits. Have we done things on stormwater and fertilizer that we can quantify and take as a credit when we're calculating the adjusted load. And this is the point where a lot of your local plans that you've already done for economic development and for other issue areas that have a wastewater impact can be incorporated. So you have an economic development plan that calls for development. You can look at what the build-out is allowable with that development, and then you can import that load here. And then you can accommodate that. So it's when we wind up with the design load down here, the design of that watershed scenario, it can incorporate plans that the town already has that may not be built yet. And I think what you'll see is you'll start to move those plans into areas where that's more beneficial than anything else. So we take the design load, we would apply any of the technologies, and then the community evaluation piece would take place. So we want to look at the evaluation here. So we look at non-collection strategies, collection strategies on both sides, and then looking at, in the watershed, how we can get to a hybrid scenario. So we have some decision support tools that we built at the Commission that are built just for this purpose. So you can see in the middle of this circle here, it talks about community confidence and cost. in our discussions with communities about hybrid scenarios, those are the three areas that tend to come up. You know, how is the community impacted? What's your level of confidence in a particular technology? And what's the overall cost? So we have a scenario assessment metric program called SAM that uses this, and it will be good. It'll be fun once we're at that point that we can use that. That goes into adaptive management plan. So adaptive management plan will list the hybrid scenario with your alternatives up top, and list that sort of background collection scenario on the bottom too. So it really runs the gamut from alternatives to traditional approaches. But you get to start with selecting those technologies that represent your hybrid approach. And at a 5-year increment, especially on alternatives, you're measuring to see if you're removing as much nitrogen as you thought. So this is the important sort of information cycle that will happen with the monitoring. So we'll know how much nitrogen we're taking out, if these technologies are working as planned, and then we'll also be able to look at that and compare it with water quality information from the estuary itself. So the 208 plan has several cost-saving measures in it, but considering collection and treatment areas where it's most appropriate is one way to start to save costs, make sewer footprints smaller. Broadening the use of remediation restoration technologies is part of that, using alternatives. And then cost sharing resulting from in lower costs for residents and affordable scenarios. But also, you know, it's with towns working together, you're going to get a more efficient outcome. I mean, even some of the most conservative analysis that we've done in 2 towns that are planning independently, and then when they play together, the most conservative savings estimate is 10%. You know, it can be a lot more than that, but 10% of $100 million is a lot of money. So we also tried to simplify the process, right? Offering more technical assistance, increasing regulatory flexibility. So the regulatory, we talked about watershed permits. We are in the final stages of discussing a new arrangement with MEPA that will make that MEPA review more fitting with the 208 process. But even the commission, right? Because if you have a comprehensive wastewater management plan, you're going to trip MEPA review, which automatically trips Cape Cod Commission review. So in the past, what would happen is we would review CWMPs when they got to the commission, and we have one regional policy plan, one set of minimum performance standards. So we would review your comprehensive wastewater management plan like it was Stop and Shop. And that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So we're going to change that whole process to come up with one that's much more supportive, easier to go through, more directed with the watershed team support we can put in. And we are closing, and within the next month, we'll have a directive out that will outline that to you. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But in discussing things with town, as the guidance document comes out, it'll address nitrogen responsibility, how we got to that responsibility assignment in 208, and how you might be able to change it if you don't agree with it. So we will lay out the criteria for that. We realize this is a starting point, it's a regional starting point. We had to use the same formula everywhere. If there's better information, if there's different information, we want to provide a process where the communities can come in and discuss that.
And you can see that presentation in its entirety by visiting the Town of Barnstable's website and clicking Video on Demand. Well, be sure to tune in to our hour-long news program, Barnstable This Morning, weekdays at 8 a.m. On Monday's show, we will chat with Assistant Town Manager Mark Ells. We'll talk with Interim Superintendent of Schools Bill Butler. Plus, we'll have all the news and information you need. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Mannel.